So Longlegs was directed by Osgood Perkins and it stars Micah Monroe, Nicolas Cage, Blair Underwood, and Alicia Witt. And it takes place in the 1990s. This FBI detective, she tries to find this serial killer known as Longlegs. It sounds pretty generic, but wait until you see the movie itself. So this is a movie that I was intrigued by for a little bit. I admittedly did not really watch any of the previews going into it. I heard there was a lot of really good buzz out of this movie that was pretty creepy. The trailers that I did see were pretty cryptic. They were pretty mysterious themselves. Like, what is this movie? What is this creepy movie about anyway? Kind of curious to see what this movie is like. And again, I didn't really look too much into it. All I knew is that Nicolas Cage was in the movie, but he wasn't really in the advertising. So I went into this movie almost completely blind. And this movie got under my skin. It is creepy. It is unsettling. It is a nightmare, and it is really well done. I really thought this was an interesting movie. I would definitely recommend this. So let's start off with the acting. I think the actors do a fantastic job. Micah Monroe, I thought she did a really good job in this movie. I definitely cared for her character. I thought she did a really good job. I definitely kind of like bought into like a lot of the things that she kind of goes through in this movie. Nicolas Cage. He is so terrifying in this movie. He is nightmare inducing. He is unsettling. And the weird thing is that he's not even in the movie a whole lot, despite his name being in the title of the movie. His character is still just incredibly unsettling. And you can definitely feel his presence both in and out of when he's on screen and when he's off screen. He is that terrifying. He is that unsettling. Oh, it's one of those performances where it's like you kind of definitely see him there, but you definitely feel like he kind of just disappeared underneath all that he does in this movie. It's terrifying. One of probably his most terrifying role, if I'm being honest. Some of the supporting actors do a fantastic job. Blair Underwood as Michael Monroe's boss. I thought he did a pretty good job in this movie, kind of being that foil to her character and such. Alicia Witt also does a pretty good job in this movie. I didn't realize when you do find out like what's going on with her character. It's like that's pretty interesting as well, and I do think that's pretty fascinating, and especially she does a really good job with it overall. The atmosphere is just disturbing. It is well done. It is executed perfectly. It is just drenching in dread. Basically, it is. You just get that vibe right away. The cinematography is also perfect. At first, it kind of seemed gimmicky because like it had like a smaller ratio, but then like when it gets to later times, it's like the ratio kind of just expands to the full screen and such. At first, I thought it was gimmicky, but afterwards, I kind of thought, okay, that's actually very well executed. I actually kind of liked what they were doing with that. The score is also very unsettling. It is very scary throughout the movie. There are definitely some moments where it kind of just got me out of my seat. Like yeah, it has jump scares, which a lot of horror movies do. They have a lot of jump scares, but the difference between jump scares in a movie like Longlegs and jump scares in a movie like, say, Imaginary, it's The Strangers Chapter 1, Night Swim, is that the jump scares in Longlegs are effective. They got me. There were moments that kind of just got me out of my seat and kind of just stuck there. And it's like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty terrifying. Yeah, you got me. You had effective jump scares. Good for you. And also, when I first heard about this movie, I thought this movie was going to just be incredibly predictable. It's like it looks like it's borrowing heavily from a lot of these like other serial killer type movies, Silence of the Lambs, Seven, Copycat, and such. And it's like, oh, what's going to make this movie different? What's going to make this movie unique? And it's like, what's so special about this movie? It is pretty unpredictable. It is pretty unpredictable. There's so many moments where it's like, yeah, it's clearly going in this direction, and it kind of just went in a completely different direction, which I kind of just did not expect. Of like, oh, that's what you're doing with this movie. Okay, that's definitely good. That's definitely something I did not see coming. And also, despite the fact that it's drenching in dread, the atmosphere is just entirely creepy, and Nicolas Cage's demonic character is just present throughout this entire movie, whether it's like literally or metaphorically. It can have some funny moments, both intentionally and unintentionally. I feel like a lot of people may look at Nicolas Cage's performance and call it like, oh, that's overacting and such, and kind of call it over the top and such. But I feel like that's you kind of want to laugh, like an uncomfortable laugh at some of the weird things that he does in this movie. but I do feel like it is still incredibly terrifying. Some of the most terrifying character work I've seen in an actor in a long time. And there are some intentional funny moments, like Blair Underwood has a few funny moments. Even Micah Monroe, despite everything that her character kind of goes through, she does have like one funny moment in the movie, but like it's definitely a moment where it's like they definitely know that this movie is not supposed to be a comedy, but they kind of have to sneak in a joke every once in a while, and I do think it's effective. And I do think that the homages to 70s is pretty effective, which is weird because, again, this movie takes place in the 1990s, you know, around the time movies like Silence of the Lambs, Seven, and Copycat came out. So the fact that it kind of feels like a 70s movie taking place in the 90s, it's kind of fascinating. Like, I feel like this movie could have taken place in any time period, and I feel like it would have worked either way. But despite my overall praise of this movie, let's talk about some of the things I don't like about this movie. Now, even though I said this movie is pretty unpredictable and there are some really good twists and turns in this movie, there are admittedly some predictable things in this movie. Like, once you see the opening scene, which, by the way, the opening scene is one of the creepiest scenes I've ever seen in a movie in a long time. So, any movie that can do that is good. But the opening scene itself, like, you can kind of see where the opening scene is going and, like, how it's going to play on later in the movie. You can kind of predict where that's going. And also, despite the fact that this movie is like, you know, just over an hour and a half, there are a few slow moments here and there. I feel like the pacing could have picked up a little bit. And also the soundtrack itself. Now, the score itself is really well done, but the soundtrack has like a couple random songs in there. I'm like, why are these songs in there? Like, after the very disturbing ending and such, which I won't go into and such, which that may be a spoiler, but I'm not going to explain it. They play a song that I'm like, that's kind of a weird song to play at the end of this movie. I don't know why that's weird, but it just feels odd. Like, I don't know why they chose this song for the end credits. It just kind of felt off considering, again, that this movie is just drenching in dread. It's like, why? I don't mind, contrasting and such, but this just felt weird to me. So even though, so Longlegs, this movie, I would recommend it. The acting, very well done, particularly from Nicolas Cage. And even though he's not in the movie that much, you still feel him there. That came out wrong, but I don't care. The atmosphere is great. The cinematography is great. The score is really well done. It is incredibly scary. It is pretty unpredictable. There are a couple funny moments here and there, and I do like the feeling of a 70s movie in the 90s. But I also feel like there are a couple predictable moments in this movie. There are some slow moments, and also the soundtrack is kind of weird at times, but I would highly recommend Longlegs. This movie creeped me out. And for a movie, like after so many movies that came out this year, again, Imaginary, Strangers Chapter 1, Night Swim, I would rather watch this again and be creeped out because, like, that was the intention of this movie. Whereas, like, those other ones, I did not feel creeped out by it. This one, yikes. I'll give Longlegs 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what's your favorite, Nicolas Cage movie? I probably asked that with Dream Scenario or Renfield or something, but, the guy has so many movies and he's done so much, like, and you never know what he's going to do next. I did not expect a movie like this. But what's your favorite Nicolas Cage movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.